lobbing it into the air. It bounced off Fabian's cheek and into the mud.
"Where's the journal?"
He squatted, grabbing Fabian's chin with his sausage fingers before slapping him lightly across the cheek. Captain said a quick prayer for her friend and started backing up, but it was too late. She stepped on a stick that lifted a crate at the base of the rubbish heap, just a fraction of an inch, and she could only grit her teeth as a tin can toppled from its perch, tinkling down the pile of debris while making a sound like a scale played on a badly tuned piano. She froze as Daniel pivoted to stare at the pile of rubbish. He turned back to Fabian, speaking warily.
"And where's Captain? Where's your pet pickpocket?"
She watched him slap Fabian's cheek one more time, the muscles in her legs tensing as he turned and started to walk toward her hiding place. 5 feet out, Daniel lunged, but all he got hold of was the remaining head of lettuce as she bolted from the mound, racing down the alleyway in a flurry of muslin, freckles, and carrot-colored pigtails. 3 blocks later, she rounded a corner, waiting. When the crack of the gun echoed down the street, she ducked into a drainage pipe to collect herself. A cockroach crawled over her foot, its antennae waving. Fabian admired cockroaches, she remembered. He said they were survivors. Suddenly, a whimper broke from her throat, and she ground the bug into a mosaic of chitinous shards before huddling in on herself, sobbing. And just as suddenly, she sat upright, her mouth set in a grim line while she ran the back of her hand across her nose. Tears were for kids, and she needed to make a plan. When Fabian turned up dead, and there was no doubt he would, Daniel would want to tie up some loose ends, namely her. She wasn't too worried about that. She knew every hidey hole in Kansas City, and the gang would watch her back. She regarded what was left of the cockroach, one of its severed legs agitating, as though not realizing the body it belonged to was already dead, and nodded to herself. It was time to put the shoe on the other foot, she decided. Something had to be done about Daniel and his boss. Chapter 2. Elsbeth Grundy. May 17th, 1895. A wheat field outside Sage, Kansas. Elsbeth Grundy was a loner, and an odd one at that, but company was headed her way whether she liked it or not. She lived in the plains of central Kansas, alone in a cabin that was, to use a charitable word, uncomplicated. It was an austere dwelling with a cast-iron stove, a table and chair, 2 cabinets, a fireplace, a rocker, and a small bedroom to the rear. Being somewhat prideful of her country habits, Elsbeth had a privy built out back, a decision she often regretted with a few choice words when the weather turned for the worse. In her bedroom was a tiny closet, and in that tiny closet were 3 cotton work frocks, 2 pairs of well-worn overalls, an occasional dress appropriate for a schoolmarm, and a family of field mice that had taken up residence in the latter's pockets. Elsbeth wasn't necessarily inclined to solitude. She'd been a happy woman once, but a bitterness had set in after Tom died and her daughter Beth Ann left to find healing elsewhere. The only company she kept these days was a tattered scarecrow she'd dressed in a seersucker suit, a Panama hat, a mop of white hair, and a thick mustache made of cotton to honor Mark Twain, her hero. There was a chalkboard hanging from its neck, on which Elsbeth would occasionally scribble her favorite Twain quotes. Currently it read, "Go to heaven for the climate, and hell for the company," proving that there were those among the God-fearing who weren't afraid to poke fun at themselves. When, on occasion, the loneliness became too much to bear, she would wander out into the field to sit next to her scarecrow and, ignoring her chores, talk until she was tired of hearing the sound of her own voice. Elle was not lovely. She was old and dusty, and she spent her evenings sitting in the wooden rocking chair by the fireplace, gathering more dust. Inevitably, she had a book in hand, which she read through wire-rimmed spectacles that took delight in slowly slipping down the bridge of her nose. This was not an easy task for the spectacles, as Elle had a rather large hook on her nose that one would think obstructed their mischief. They managed anyway. Beginning this particular day, as she did all her days, Elle awakened to collect her spectacles and quietly changed from her nightgown to a frock. She said a quick prayer, ending it with an appeal for rain. Kansas was experiencing an uncommon